Hello, I'm Kenan Profit, and in this BlenderBranch.com tutorial, we're going to blow things up. So in this tutorial, we're going to be tackling the compositor, and we're going to use the motion tracking tab a little bit, and this is really made possible by some great stock footage that was shot by ActionVFX, and the guys there, they do some really fantastic work. And if you've never been to that site, definitely go and check it out, because we're going to be using some of the free elements from there. The example you just saw used some of their 4K examples. So if you feel the need to kind of up your game, then definitely check those out from your website. But if you want to follow along with just the free products, then I'll make the links available to the footage that we're going to be using for that. But yeah, actionvfx.com, it's a great website for stock footage and for VFX artists. This site should just be a constant resource for you, because you're about to see how easy it is to really add some awesome VFX to your movie. So let's jump right into Blender by going into the motion tracking section and opening up our footage. Now I'm going to use some footage that I didn't actually shoot. My good friend Seth Foster from momentimaging.com shot this, and I'm going to open up this clip. And yeah, check out momentimaging.com. He does some really cool work there as well. And this is actually just kind of a GoPro test, I think, that he and his brothers out in Iowa, they shot this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the scene frames in Blender, and that just tells Blender to put the timeline to the length of that clip. And then I'm going to prefetch it, and that just caches in all my frames like so. And that allows Blender to play this smoothly and quickly. Now there's a few things that we can tell about our footage as we play through it. First of all, nothing happens for a good few hundred frames here. But you also see this is a tripod shot, so that means we're going to be needing to add in some camera shake and things like that later on. And also we have this nice overcast sky that's really going to come in to help us out later on in the compositor. So there we go, we have our soldier kind of jumping over, and you see there's this dirt flying everywhere. This was really creative. They what they did was they filled a potato gun up with dirt, and then as he kind of launched himself over this hill, they shot that potato gun out so that dirt would go flying everywhere. And if you read any of my blog posts and things like that, you know that I firmly believe the best way to do visual effects is when they're mixed with practical effects. And this is just a great example of that. You have the practical effects, you know, the setting is perfect for kind of this wartime shot, but then you have the practical effects of the dirt flying up, which kind of further emphasizes the explosion that we're going to put in, which is technically, you know, a fake effect, but that really works beautifully well. So back to where this starts. We really don't need the first 500 or so frames. So what I'm going to do, I'll press N to bring up this sidebar, and I'm going to go to my footage settings, and I'm going to offset this by 550 frames. And what that does is allows us to still start at frame 0, but the footage is offset so that we don't have to wait as long before we get to the action. And I'll go ahead and end my timeline at frame 250. So now our clip is set in nice and clean like so. Okay, beautiful. Now what I'm going to do is just straight away load in some of that stock footage from actionvfx.com. So I'm going to go clip and open clip. And I'm going to go to the stock footage. And this is the free explosion that they have on their site. So I'm going to load in that explosion. And you can see what they did. They were brilliant enough to turn the camera sideways and shoot the explosion long ways like so that you don't miss a single bit of detail, and so that there's no cropping involved. So we can scale this up, scale it down, it'll look awesome no matter which way you do it. So that's just really cool. One of the big issues I found with stock footage in the past is that explosions are hard to shoot, and you always get something chopped off. So it's very cool that they did that. Now I'm going to load in some of this lingering smoke, and this will just be kind of a nice way to add in some smoke on top of our scene. And I downloaded a couple of these. I might might load in this one too. You might as well just go through and pick out what you want, because there's so much good footage there and good stuff that you can really quickly customize your shot. I definitely want this. This is kind of a smoke burst. Well, let's jump to frame 1. The smoke kind of shoots out, so we can use this for when that explosion first occurs. You would definitely want there to be some smoke reaction as well. Now, last but definitely not least, we want these nice billowing smoke plumes. So I have a few downloaded. I'm just going to pick this one for now as an example. So that's enough for us to get started. So now let's jump into the compositor. We have all our footage set, and what I always like to do within compositor, drag that window over, set this to the timeline, and give ourselves some space. So now we have a nice big clean workspace. Also set my resolution all the way to 100. I want my final frame rate to be at 24, so there might be some frame droppage, but it'll be worth it for that nice cinematic 24 frames per second. Let's delete that render layer because we're not going to be using anything in the default section of Blender. I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to drop in a movie clip node. And now from here we have all that footage that we loaded in the motion tracking tab. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to choose my footage from momentimaging.com, and I'll press Control Shift and click on there, and that gets a viewer node in. And now if we hit backdrop, we're able to see our footage there. I'll press V to kind of zoom out so that we can see what we're doing. And I'll go ahead and hit auto render because that's helpful. Now we can look through our footage here and see where we have our kind of action take place, which is right about there. You want to make sure there's a lot of action here so that we see the dirt happening and all of that good stuff, because that's going to come in helpful when we isolate our actor. So why do we need to isolate it? Well, I'll give you an example of what this would look like if we just put that explosion in. So I'm going to duplicate this movie clip node, and I'm going to add in a scale node in case we ever decide to. It's always a good practice to do this. Set the scale to render size. That way if you ever change anything over here, it'll change there as well. So just a good habit to add in a scale node. Anyway, with this movie clip, I'm going to select our explosion. And you can see, because this footage was shot vertically, instead of hitting stretch, it's going to distort us. So let's hit fit, and that gets rid of that distortion as well. Okay, so if we just drop in, the obvious choice, alpha over, and plug in our footage, because there's a nice alpha channel that is already pre-keyed in over this explosion, which is just dead awesome. We have right away an explosion just composited into our scene, and we can hit Shift A and throw in a transform node and drop that in. And what this allows us to do is scale this up. Let's go, I don't know, 2. Let's get really crazy. Let's go 3. Oh boy. And we can use the X and Y values to move this explosion around and kind of place it where you want it. And you also want this to be angled sort of the direction of the footage. And I'm going to scale this down. We got a little too crazy there. Let's go 2.5. And again, this will look different from the example that you saw at the beginning, because this is one of the smaller explosions that they make for free. But definitely, if you check out some of the other ones, you can make some really epic shots. But what we're doing is just kind of lining this up. And okay, we're done. No, that looks awful. So this is why we want this explosion to get behind our actor here. So how do we do this? Well, that's where the good old Luminance key node comes in handy. But I want to mention something here. If we just have a look at our footage here, the footage lends itself very well to being able to just key out the sky. Now, your footage might not do that, and we can talk through some other options here. But you can notice this is a nice overcast sky, and everything that's dark in our scene is basically what we want to keep, and everything that's light we want to isolate. So we can use a key on luminance, which is basically, I'll show you where that is. If you just go Shift A, matte, and luminance key, We can drop that in after the scale node of this. I'm just going to delete that alpha over so we don't get confused here. So with this luminance key, I'm just going to press Control Shift and left click on that. And we don't want to view the image, we want to view the map. So let's click again to see the map. And now we can adjust this high and low value here. If we take down the high, you can see that brightens the white values. If we take up the low, that darkens the darks. So basically, you want everything you want to keep, you want to be completely dark, and everything we want to get rid of is going to be completely white. So you want to make sure, like here, some of this grass is disappearing. That's no good. So we want to adjust this accordingly. And this doesn't have to be perfect by any means. In fact, we're going to use some light wrapping because we want some of that original scene to still be there. So right about there, that's kind of perfectly clean. You still want some of this dirt in your shot, but you definitely want that isolation to be there. So now we have a really good mask. And what we need to do here is invert this so that Blender reads the black and white values properly. So I'm just going to drop in an invert node. So now it's reversed. Everything that's white is going to be what we're isolating from the background. And now what we're able to do, since we've inverted that, is we can set the alpha. So if we just drop in a set alpha node and set that here, you want to plug in our luminance key to the alpha. And now that says, okay, so everything, all that white or all that dark value, what was it? I don't even know now. That was keyed out. And now we want, there we go. And now we want the image to be put into the image of that set alpha node. And there you go. Now we've isolated our ground plane and our actor from the background. So now what we're able to do with this, and don't worry about some of the hard edges, we'll take care of all that later. The important thing is that it is now isolated and we're able to put an explosion in there. So we used the luminance key node to create a matte, which created a nice black and white mask for us. We inverted that in order for us to be able to set the alpha. And we plugged in our image into that alpha node there. So now what we can do is bring back this alpha over node and plug it in after that set alpha. And then take the output of our movie clip, our explosion, into the bottom of that, into the top. And now we have our actor and our ground plane in front of that explosion, which is awesome. And if you hit convert pre-multiply, you get some of that color back in. And I don't always like to use that because it tends to put kind of a dark line around everything. But in this instance, it's pretty valuable to go ahead and keep that checked. But now you'll notice our background has disappeared because, or our sky. We need our sky. So you can definitely drop in, if you want to change the sky, you can just put buildings back there. You can put whatever you want. I'm just going to use the original sky. I like that sort of hazy wartime look. So what I'm going to do is we still have an alpha channel here. So everything behind our actor and behind the explosion is on alpha. So I'm just going to duplicate this alpha over node like so. I'm going to take my original image from our scale node. You want to make sure you use the scale and put it into the bottom of that alpha over. And that was the wrong one. I'm going to put it into the top. And now there you go. Just like that, we've composited our original footage in behind our mask that we created with the luminance key. So hopefully we're not getting too confused here. But basically you can see that the whatever edge feathering issues were going on there, we took care of that by putting the original background back in behind. So any details are nicely filled in, which is just awesome. Now, this is where I want to point out. I looked at the footage, analyzed it. It was a tripod shot, so we don't have to do any camera tracking. And the sky is the only, the sky was bright enough for us to do a luminance key. So we're able to use that. Now, your footage may be totally different. You may have an actor running through buildings or, I don't know, a train wreck or something. Or there may be other actors behind your actor that you want to layer that explosion and where it is. So you may be thinking, okay, a luminance keying on the light, that's not going to work for me. What do I do? Well, if you don't, if you're unable to shoot against a green screen or something like that, you can shoot your footage wherever you want to and use this exact same method. You would just have to do some rotoscoping. So that's a pain, but all that is, you inside your motion tracking section. So if I bring back my footage, you would just create a mask. You'd go from tracking to mask, and you would create, a much more detailed mask than this around your actor, however detailed you want that to be to isolate your actor. And then frame by frame, you would have to animate that mask. Okay. So rotoscoping, it's a very common visual effects thing in the industry. But you would just set a keyframe, move a frame, move your mask, and then, obviously you wouldn't want it to look anything like this. This is a terrible example. I'm just showing you what then you would do is inside the compositor, rather than having this luminance key, you would have just a mask node with whatever mask you created there, and you'd plug that in, and it would work the same way. So if your footage isn't, in the perfect world, we can all just do things the easy way. But if you have footage that's a little more complex, you would just need to use rotoscoping to isolate your character from the background or your ground plane or whatever it is that you want isolated. Okay, that was enough for that. I don't need to go into too much detail because that's a totally different tutorial, and we're going to stick with this. Okay, so now we have our explosion in behind our actor, which is great. So now what we can do, that's really the majority of it. Now it's just kind of your preference of the timing of everything and how much smoke and all of that sort of things you want to add in. So first of all, what we have to watch here is this explosion happens way too soon. So our actor doesn't jump over this cliff until, right about frame 100. That's when he's really making the leap. So if this explosion started at about frame 80, I'm thinking that would be pretty good timing. So let's go back into motion tracking and let's pull up that explosion. And we're going to go to the footage settings, and we're going to offset this by negative 80 frames. So that is, it doesn't start until frame 80, because the explosion starts exploding right at frame 0. So now it starts right at frame 80, which is perfect. So if we jump into compositing now and we jump to frame 80, you can see there's nothing there, and then it's starting right there. We can't see it because it's kind of behind it. And now the effect we have is that explosion is happening really right as our actor is jumping over. And I might even start it sooner. So I might start it at frame 65. And again, that's just personal taste. Do it however you want, really. I want there to be a little more bang in there when he's kind of jumping over. I want you to be able to see a lot more. It just kind of looks epic when there's more there. And I might scale this up. Maybe it wasn't so crazy before. I might go 2.8 and then bring it up some. So it's right about there. And drag it over on the X value. Right about there. And it's a lot different making adjustments in a tutorial. You'll definitely want to fine tune all of this, make it look good for your purposes and all of that. All right, so now we'll adjust kind of the look of this explosion later, but we want to get some of that smoke in there. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go ahead and duplicate this movie clip and scale node by pressing Shift and D. And I'm going to choose one of the smoke plumes. So I'm going to grab, or actually no, we want that smoke explosion that happens right when that explosion happens. So let's choose this smoke front. And that was, it's kind of blotchy to work like this, but it's sort of just the nature of Blender's compositor. The smoke front, that was this footage right here. So kind of shoots out at frame 0. So let's offset that. Let's go, let's have it shoot out at about frame 65 when the explosion started. So I offset it negative 65 frames, and that allows it to start later on. So we're kind of working left to right here. I'll condense all of this. Hopefully you can still see what's going on there, but I don't want things to get kind of out of order. So I'm going to bring over this smoke burst kind of after this alpha over. So this is sort of where we are to this point. And I'm going to add in a mix node after there, and I'm going to plug in our smoke to the mix node. Now the smoke and all the smoke either has a black or a white channel, because it's very hard to key out, smoke. So that's very easy, because black, what we can do is, if it's black, we can either screen it or we can add it, and that gets rid of the black channel. So now we have that smoke added to our scene, and what we need to do is drop in a transform node. So I'm just going to duplicate Shift D that transform node, and that's kind of the perfect scale, actually. Didn't even mean for that. And we'll just move this into position. So it's angled, which is good. We'll move it into position for that explosion, so that there's definitely some nice smoke filling our shot, like so. And now the same issue, we want it to be behind that ground plane. So what we can do, because we have a nice mix node here, we can just take the output of our mask. So let's see, let's go from this map and plug it into the factor of this add node, and boom, that puts the smoke behind that layer. Now it'll still be, I think it'll be in front of our no, it goes behind the actor too. Yeah, yep. So it's completely behind the actor. So now we have a nice layer of smoke composited into our shot as well. And yeah, that looks just really cool. You definitely don't want an explosion without the smoke, because it'll just look goofy, because you don't have fire without smoke. So there you go. There's the smoke composited. And if you want to kind of do sort of what I did and put that smoke plume of kind of a distant billowing smoke, really it's just all the same stuff. Just Shift D, duplicate the movie clip, scale, and transform node. I might, I'll just delete the transform node. Those values aren't going to match up. And I'll drop in a, let's see, smoke plume here. And this smoke is on a white channel, because it's dark smoke. So we know we need to, instead of setting it to add, we're going to set it to multiply, because that's how you get rid of the white channel. And there you go. We have a nice smoke in there in our scene. You want to make sure you select this button right there, because that gets rid of that any border that might be going on. And we need to scale it up as well, so it kind of fits our scene. So I'm going to drop in a transform node, and I'll scale this up. I'll go 1.2, and then move it along the X and Y axis. Again, this is all to taste where you want this to be. I'll have it angled slightly to the side so it matches the angle of our camera, which is important. And that looks pretty good. And same thing, we want it to be behind that ground plane. So right now that's kind of sticking up over that ground plane. That doesn't look good. So we'll do the same story. Let's take, let's see, where is it? The output of our mat here. We got things going all over the place. We're going to take the output of the mat and plug into the factor of that multiply. And there you go. Now it's nicely behind there. Now you can definitely see some little, what do you call it, artifacting going on there. So I'm going to drop in a blur node here and just blur that slightly. We'll blur the edges there. Go one. Yeah, that's pretty good. But here's an important thing with VFX and really any artwork. Atmospheric perspective is how our brains know how big or how little or the distance of things. So this scaling of this smoke may look okay, but it's too vibrant because if something were that small off in the distance, you wouldn't be able to see it that well. So we need to decrease the brightness of that smoke. And we can do that just by duplicating this node and just setting that to mix, and then just turning this factor down. And there you go. Now we get some hazier smoke off from the distance. Now, if you'd like to do what I did in my final shot, I put another smoke plume over here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. I mean, might as well, right? Just to kind of show you guys. I want to be as close to the effect that I show at the beginning as we can be. So duplicate all of these nodes, and let's see, we'll take the output of our mask into the factor of that, and then I'll set this into the bottom of there. So now we have another smoke plume here. Actually, I don't want that. I want it to be in front. And this is how you can further emphasize atmospheric perspective. So if I duplicate that transform node, I'll angle it slightly, but I'm going to put the scale up. I'll put it to about a 2, and then move it over. Hello. Move it over this way. I wasn't paying attention to which direction was which there. Okay, so move it over. Not only what I'm doing here, not only am I showing layers to our composite where we have some atmospheric perspective, but I'm also framing our shot. So we have kind of a border over here. We have a border over there. So I'm literally, through compositing and adding visual effects, we're further emphasizing what's important in the shot, which is the explosion and our actor. So use these effects to frame your shot, and you can just get really cool results. And also, you know, by fading this one, you have that atmospheric perspective. Your eye knows where to look. You know what the scaling is, and overlapping. So making sure the right elements are behind in the right places through either the luminance key that we created our matte with, or you may have to use rotoscoping or something like that to isolate those elements. So really, that's it, guys. That's the compositing. I know this kind of looks scary, but if you sort of follow all of this, you realize we're adding just a bunch of footage. What I did with my final one, just to be fun, I added a smoke channel over top of the whole thing. So I think I added, let's see, added something like this where there's just kind of billowing smoke, just to make it look like there's smoke everywhere. You may want to do that to your final shot because that'll further emphasize that sort of wartime look. Now all the compositing is done. So I mentioned we have our movie clip, just to review. It's plugged into a scale node. We have our luminance key, which is doing really the job that rotoscoping could be doing. All that's doing is isolating to create a mask. And then we have that set to an alpha, and that's all plugged into an alpha over, and that's enabling us to composite our explosion in behind. And then I plugged all of that into the bottom of another alpha over and plugged our original footage here into the top of that alpha over to bring back our background. And then what I did was just start adding a bunch of mixed nodes, basically. And with a smoke channel that has a black channel, we set that to add. And then I used multiply for smoke that has a white channel. And then we've just added a bunch of smoke. So that's really it. That's kind of the walkthrough here. Now, you don't want to just walk away from this. You want to make sure that everything looks good. So in order to bring back some of the brightness of our explosion, which this explosion has a lot of information. I think most of their explosions are 4K. This one might be a 2K. But there's still a lot of resolution there that we can bring back if we bring out an RGB curves node and drop that in. We can sort of brighten up the explosion, first of all, because this would be bright. but you also get some of that contrast in. You can kind of get more detail out, pulling out these darks to kind of show more of the alpha channel that's in that explosion. You get more information there. Definitely play around with the curves here to make it fit and match your particular scene, your shot, and what you want that to look like. So once you make adjustments to this and get it how you want to do some light wrapping. There's a lot of different ways to do light wrapping in Blender. Basically, what light wrapping is it's very important anytime you're doing effects. This light we need from the explosion, we need that to affect the actor, because if it's just kind of there and the actor remains kind of in the shadows, it's not going to look very realistic. Now we have everything sort of built in place right now. I know our node setup is getting kind of confusing, so I apologize for that. But we have two alpha over nodes here. Remember, we have this one that was created from our set alpha and our original image that had the mask, and it was added with the explosion, and then we put that into our background image using this alpha. So this is our original footage coming from the scale node, plugged into the top of that alpha over. What we can do in order to do a little bit of light wrapping is the factor of this set alpha, if we just blur that by using our original mask, so this matte right here, if we use this as the factor of this alpha over node, okay, and then just blur it, let's see, now let's invert these, there you go. And now if we blur, so okay, I'm going to move things around so we can see what we're doing. So that this matte is now the factor of this alpha over. If we drop in a blur node right there and just set this, we'll go like 2 by 2 by 2. You can see we get some, if I crank this up here, we get more of that light kind of coming around our actor here. So obviously that's too much, but I just want to show you the effect that you get. So I'm going to do something very little like that, and we can see the effect that has. You know, it's subtle, but you want to make sure you have a little bit of that light. So you can definitely adjust how much or how little of that you want there to be in your shot. So that's sort of it for the compositing side of things. Again, you want to make sure that everything is in the right order. The elements that you want to be composited are in there. You'll definitely want to do some color grading. You can do that now in this step, or in the next step we're going to take all our frames into the video sequence editor and add the camera shake. So I'll just kind of show you my basic color setup. I like to kind of boost the brights a little, take them sort of to the yellows, and then I like to take my darks to the blues, and that gives kind of a cinematic look like so. And then I like to desaturate everything. So I throw in a hue saturation node, and I'll take the saturation down to 0.8. And that just kind of makes it look more cinematic, I find. But again, that's just kind of a quick and dirty color correction there. You can definitely make changes, make it your own. The point of this is just to kind of show you guys some of the steps I took to get the final shot that I made, and show you sort of how to do compositing in Blender and how it really is actually quite possible. I did add things like lens distortion, which is a lot of fun. So if this populates here, add a little bit of distortion, maybe 0.2. That's going to be too much. Yeah, let's go 0.04. And then you want to hit fit so that it stretches to the corners. And that just kind of adds a little bit of lens barreling, a little bit of chromatic aberration to make it look like this was all happening in the same place at the same time. You can see around here around the edges as well. And it sort of further emphasizes that wartime shot that we get, the effect that we want to pull off there. Now, keep in mind, any of these values, the brightness values, the distortion, even things like this curves node on the explosion, these things can be animated. So if you want to add little brightness or extra distortions and things like that, you can definitely animate them using keyframes throughout the entirety of your shot. So just keep that in mind and be creative with sort of your overall effect that you want to create. But for now, that's it, guys. That's the compositing. That's how to composite stock footage into your shot using Blender. And what you want to do now is you want to save this out as a video file, or if you want to kind of take it to the next step by doing some camera shake, I would save it out as a series of PNGs, and then choose a folder, choose an output directory, make sure you have a composite node hooked up there at the end, and hit animation. And what that's going to do is render out, here I'll just show you, if we create kind of a directory here, I'll create a tutorial, and if we just render that out, it's going to start creating a series of PNGs that will be your final video clip. And then what we can do is take those inside of the video sequence editor to add a camera shake. And if you want to add sound effects and things like that, you can do that there as well. So let's jump into the video sequence editor and I'll show you how I did the camera shake effect. So once we're inside the video editing, I'm going to press Shift A, and because I have an image sequence for my final shot, I'm going to select image, and I'm going to go to where I have my explosion, which is, I believe, this one. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to just add, I'm going to press A to select all of those and add image to strip. And Blender knows what it has going on here, and it automatically puts it into a video clip that we can watch and play through. And you can see this is my original result. So this is the example you saw at the beginning, and we got pretty close to it in the tutorial. Not bad. You can see there's a few added elements. I added some smoke in over top and did a little more light wrapping work. So that definitely kind of adds to the overall effect. Now, what we want to do is, you can see it looks very boring if you have this big explosion and there's no sort of camera shake. So for one thing, this is a tripod shot, and that alone in and of itself is kind of boring. So we want to make sure we try to get this to look like it was shot with a handheld camera. So one of the ways we can do that is let's add in a transform node to our movie clip strip. So let's press Shift A, FX strip, and transform. And over here on the position, the X and Y, and the rotation, I'm going to jump to frame 1 here. Over here on position, I'm going to hit I on the X and Y values, and you can see up here to the left of our graph editor, we have these values being added in here, these transform values. I'm going to do the same for scale and rotation. So now what that enables us to do is, up here in our graph editor, I'm going to press N, bring up this sidebar, and if we go to modifiers, we can add a modifier to these transforms. So I'm going to add modifier, and I'm going to add a noise transform modifier. So now what that did was, on this first modifier, this X modifier, there is a noise transform. So if we play, you can see, based off of this noise, it's moving along the x-axis back and forth, giving us a little bit of camera shake. So these values here are what determine that. So if I set the scale of that noise to, say, 2, and the strength of it, let's go, I don't know, 3. You can see if we press Alt A and play it, you can see now there's a lot more back and forth shaking going on here. So we're going to just kind of a subtle handheld. So I'll set this to 3 and a strength to about 1.5. We can offset it, and then again play with the phase. This is sort of the pattern of noise that is. The depth is sort of, it's kind of how much, how little. It also affects the change, where this peak changes to the next. That's sort of what the depth is. So if we press play, you can see there's a slight amount of movement on the x-axis. So let's do the same for the y. I'm just going to add modifier and noise, and I'm just going to kind of breeze through this, just set random values for each of these, because this is just kind of the handheld aspect, getting it to look like it's handheld. So I'll do the same thing for the scale. I'll keep this very low. You don't want this, you know what? Forget the scale. We don't even need the scale. I don't know why I added those scale nodes in. We just need rotation. So the X and Y, that's the up and down axis. So our camera is shaking around a good bit. You can see it looks pretty believable, pretty much like a handheld shot. There's a good amount of randomness going on. You may see, if you do too much scaling, you may see that the video is moving inside the frame, and you'd get some blank pixels there, and you definitely don't want that. So what I'm going to do is increase the overall scale of our video. That must be where I got confused with the scale. I knew I was going to do something with the scale. So let's just set this to 1.2. It's too much. Let's go 1.1 by 1.1. And that should take care of that problem. Yeah, you lose a little bit of information, but you know, it's worth it for just even. Let's clear that keyframe. There we go. That takes care of that problem. Okay, now that we have that, let's set this to 1.1 by 1.1. Okay, now our problem is taken care of. I was getting so confused. Okay, so now with the rotation, this is where we really want to add the noise when our explosion hits. So when this explosion kind of booms out there, that's when we want our camera to shake. So let's select the rotation, add modifier and noise, and I'm going to set the scale pretty high, so I'll set this to 5. I'm going to set the phase, just kind of crank it up till you see something crazy, and we'll increase the strength as well. And now restrict frame range. This is where we want it to start at about frame 90. Or actually, let's go frame 95. And then only there for about 20 or so frames. So let's have it end at frame 115. And now we can have a look at what that looks like. When the explosion hits, the camera kind of rocks back and forth to the right. You can see I added an extra flash there in my final shot. We might extend this out. I might go 120 or 125. And you can play with the depth, increase the strength a bit. I want to make sure I see some nice camera shake going on when that initial sort of boom happens. And it's kind of hard to see because Blender's playing only at 6 frames per second. So I'll let it cache in these frames, and we'll be able to see the final result here. So there you go. There's a good amount of camera shake. Again, you can, if we turn down the scale, that gets the rotation closer in to each other, so there's kind of sharper rotation, kind of more of a dramatic camera shake. This is all up to taste. This is how you want that camera shake to look, and it's all what matches your footage that you shoot and the look that you want. But that's how to do camera shake inside of Blender using the video sequence editor. Pretty simple. Now if you want to add sound effects, you can add all of that inside the video sequence editor as well. There's just a sound bite right there that you can add. If you need a comprehensive tutorial on using the video sequence editor, I have one on my YouTube channel or on blenderbranch.com. You can just go and check that out as well. So then it would be a matter of just going over to the default section and rendering out your animation from the video sequence editor. If you've loaded a new scene, all you have to do is hit animation. If you're working on the same sequence as your timeline, like if you just went from your compositor where you're working on everything and went straight to the video sequence editor, then in order to render out the final output with what we did in the editor, under post-processing, you'll just uncheck compositor and leave sequencer checked. And that way you'll make sure to be able to get the animation from the video sequence editor. That's it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you can use it to make some really awesome visual effects. And stick around on blenderbranch.com. Have a look at some of my other visual effects tutorials using Blender. I also have a VFX training pack called Light It Up, where you can learn some tips and tricks and skills to improve your art as a VFX artist and learn how to make awesome things together in Blender. So check ActionVFX out, download some stock footage, go shoot some epic short films or some movies, and bring it all into Blender and make some explosive awesomeness. and then share it with me. I'd love to see what you guys create using this tutorial. So send me a link all over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know, whatever else. You can find me on blenderbranch.com, pretty much any of those places. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Go make something awesome, and I'll talk to you in the next blenderbranch.com tutorial. Thanks for watching.